The message came in just after midnight. My phone lit up on the nightstand, and I reached for it half asleep, expecting something ordinary, a weather alert, maybe a late email from work. Instead, it was my wife, Amanda, texting from her girls' trip in Miami. Her words cut through the darkness like a knife. "I'm not coming back. I've met someone much better and younger than you." I stared at the screen, my chest hollow, my mind refusing to process what I was reading. 21 years of marriage, erased in a single message. No explanation, no hesitation, just the cold declaration of someone who had already left. Before I could even react, another notification buzzed. This time it was from my bank. Amanda had transferred our joint savings, all of it, into her personal account. Every dollar I had worked for, every paycheck I'd deposited, every careful budget we'd kept together was gone in seconds. The balance on our joint account flashed like a cruel joke. Zero. I should have screamed, thrown something, called her in a rage. That's what most men would have done. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there in silence, staring at the phone, the glow reflecting off the empty bedroom walls. And then I typed back 2 words. Good luck. That was it. No pleading. No threats. Just calm acknowledgement. She thought she had beaten me. She thought she had taken everything. But what she didn't know was that I had been preparing for something like this for a long time. My name is Mark Reynolds. I'm 47 years old, a financial consultant in Dallas, Texas. Numbers have always been my language. Budgets, investments, risk management, they're second nature to me. For years, Amanda used to joke that I treated our household finances like a Fortune 500 company. And she wasn't wrong. I kept track of everything. I knew where every dollar went, where every weakness was. She thought it was obsessive. I called it protection. Now, sitting there in the quiet, I realized just how much that discipline was about to matter. Because while Amanda believed she had walked away with the prize, she hadn't accounted for the systems I'd built, the safeguards I'd put in place long before she met her new someone better. I didn't close my eyes again that night. I sat in the dark, planning. Silent, steady, methodical. By the time the sun rose, Amanda thought she had won. She had no idea she'd just triggered a chain of events that would dismantle everything she thought she controlled. And when she checked her balance the next morning, she would finally understand the cost of underestimating me. By the time the sun rose, my plan was already taking shape. Amanda thought she had drained our accounts, but she had never understood how I structured our finances. To her, money was just a number on a screen. To me, it was a system, layered and protected, built like a fortress with hidden gates only I knew about. The joint savings account she emptied was never the real stronghold. It was the facade, the surface. For years, I had funneled a portion of our income into other places, legitimate accounts, investments, retirement portfolios, all structured under my name. She had access to what she thought was everything, but it was only the decoy. When she clicked transfer, she believed she had taken the whole war chest. In reality, she had grabbed the crumbs. Still, I let her think she'd won. Silence was my weapon. If I reacted, she would know there was more. If I begged or threatened, she would dig deeper. Instead, I replied with those 2 words, good luck, and left her with the illusion of victory. At my office later that morning, I logged into my private system. Years of habit had trained me to keep meticulous records. Every transaction was logged, every movement cataloged. I traced Amanda's transfer. She had pushed the money into her personal checking account, then into a new account I hadn't seen before. A personal stash she must have opened months earlier. That told me 2 things. First, she had been planning this far longer than her late-night message suggested. Second, she believed secrecy was her advantage. I smiled at the screen. Secrecy was mine. While Amanda enjoyed poolside cocktails with her new companion, I was drafting quiet countermeasures. I reviewed our mortgage, under my name. The cars, both financed through me. The credit lines, secured by my accounts. Even the utilities ran through my Social Security. She might have stolen the cash, but she hadn't taken the structure. And the structure was everything. By noon, I moved the first pieces into place. I shifted investments into secure trusts, unreachable to anyone but me. I froze secondary accounts she might still have access to. And I prepared a report of her transfer, logged with timestamps, ready to hand to my attorney when the time was right. Amanda thought she had checked me into the corner. What she didn't know was that I had been playing a longer game, years in the making. She had taken her shot, loud and messy. I was about to answer in silence. When she checked her balance the next morning, the first crack in her illusion would appear. And from there, the collapse would be inevitable. The next morning, Amanda woke up in Miami believing she was free, that she had traded a husband for a new life funded by stolen savings. I knew the exact moment she logged into her account. I had set alerts months ago, not because I expected betrayal, but because I trusted systems more than people. When she checked her balance, the number staring back at her wasn't what she expected. The transfer had gone through, yes, but the funds she moved were flagged automatically. My safeguards, invisible to her, had placed holds that required my authorization for release. She didn't know the accounts were structured that way because she never cared to learn. Now, instead of hundreds of thousands ready to spend, she had a frozen account with a warning message she couldn't bypass. I didn't gloat. I didn't call her to explain. I let the silence settle. Her confusion would grow on its own. Silence has a way of making people panic louder than words ever could. By noon, I received another message from her. This one wasn't triumphant. It was frantic. She demanded to know why the money wasn't accessible, accused me of interfering, threatened to bring in lawyers. I didn't answer. I archived the message and added it to my file. Evidence. Every word she typed was another nail in her own coffin. Meanwhile, I adjusted my next moves. Our mortgage payment was due in 3 days. Amanda didn't know that every payment pulled directly from my primary account, not the joint one she had raided. She also didn't realize that her name on the house meant liability, not control. When the payment posted without issue, she'd see that nothing had changed in her favor. Her fantasy of independence would already start to crack. I kept my days calm, almost routine. I went to work, advised clients, reviewed portfolios. No one around me could sense the storm brewing just beyond my silence. That was the point. I wanted Amanda to feel as if the ground beneath her was shifting while I remained steady, immovable. That night, I poured a drink and opened my laptop. Her account showed multiple failed attempts to withdraw. She had even tried transferring smaller amounts, thinking the system might allow her to bypass restrictions. Each attempt was blocked, logged, preserved. Amanda had fired her first shot. Now, as the silence pressed in around her, she was realizing she had never understood the battlefield. I wasn't chasing her. I was waiting, cold and patient, while her own mistakes tightened the trap she had built for herself. And this was only the beginning. By the third day, Amanda's tone shifted from panic to rage. She flooded my phone with messages, accusing me of sabotage, insisting the money was hers to take. I didn't reply. Silence was my response, and silence has a way of amplifying desperation. Every threat she typed became more reckless, more emotional. I archived them all, knowing each one would matter later. That morning, I visited my attorney, a man I'd trusted for years. I laid the file on his desk, screenshots of her transfer, bank alerts, the string of angry messages. He didn't need convincing. The evidence was clean, undeniable. He reminded me that community property laws cut both ways. She might have thought she was entitled to half, but draining the account secretly, while announcing abandonment, made her position weaker than she could imagine. We drafted motions quietly, injunctions to freeze additional assets, petitions to protect my investments, filings that placed every financial move under the scrutiny of the court. By the time Amanda realized what was happening, the law would already be on my side. She thought she was playing with money. I was playing with structure, paper, precedent. She was swinging wildly. I was building walls. Meanwhile, the accounts she thought she controlled were slowly closing in on her. The bank, alerted by my attorney's filings, placed restrictions. She would see error messages, delays, requests for documentation. Each one a reminder that the power she thought she had was slipping through her fingers. I never confronted her. I never explained. I wanted her to feel the silence every time she checked her phone, waiting for a reply that would never come. I wanted her to feel the silence every time a withdrawal failed, every time a banker gave her the same polite answer. Pending review. At night, I sat in my office with the blinds drawn, watching the slow tightening of the net I'd cast. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't celebrating. This was methodical work, the same way I had built systems for clients all my life. Patient, deliberate, unstoppable. Amanda had made her move in the heat of passion, running to someone younger with the illusion of victory. But illusions don't hold weight in courtrooms. Illusions don't pay mortgages. Illusions don't stand up against documentation filed with precision. She had left me with nothing but a text message and a stolen account. In return, I was taking back everything, piece by piece, silently, with the kind of calculation she never saw coming. And she was only just beginning to feel it. By the end of the week, Amanda's glamorous escape began to unravel. The messages I received from her grew shorter, sharper. She demanded answers about why her card was declined at a hotel. She accused me of cutting her off on purpose. She threatened to come back to Dallas and make a scene. I said nothing. Each time, I archived her words into the growing file that told the real story. Meanwhile, my attorney's motions worked their way quietly through the system. Accounts froze. Credit lines tightened. Every asset connected to both our names shifted into the custody of the court. Amanda believed she had walked away with freedom. Instead, she had walked straight into a cage built by her own decisions. I kept living as if nothing had changed. I went to work. I met with clients. I sat in boardrooms where numbers obeyed rules Amanda never understood. At night, I returned to the quiet house, pouring myself a drink and reviewing updates from the attorney. The stillness gave me clarity. Silence wasn't just my weapon anymore. It was my shield. Word reached me indirectly about her knew someone better. A friend of a friend had seen them together at a rooftop bar in Miami. Younger, yes. Flashy, yes. But already, the shine was fading. The moment Amanda's cards failed and her accounts froze, cracks would have appeared. Men like him don't sign up for problems. They chase ease, luxury, novelty. I knew she was about to learn just how fast better can walk away when money isn't flowing. The beauty of it all was that I didn't have to lift a finger. I wasn't chasing her, wasn't spying, wasn't interfering. I had already done my work years ago, structuring everything in layers that protected me while leaving her blind. Every safeguard, every audit, every trust one built had become the walls closing in around her. By Friday evening, another message came through. This one was different. Shorter. Less rage, more unease. She asked if I had done something to her accounts. She asked if I would consider talking. I let the phone sit on the table, vibrating, while I stared at the dark window. She had made her declaration from the poolside, loud and triumphant. Now her voice was faltering. The silence she once thought was weakness had become the echo she couldn't escape. And the real collapse hadn't even begun. The following Monday, the first legal notices reached Amanda. My attorney filed for temporary control of marital assets, supported by evidence of her unauthorized transfer. The court moved quickly, placing restrictions not only on the money she tried to steal, but also on her personal accounts tied to our marriage. Overnight, her access narrowed even further. I didn't call to warn her. I didn't gloat. I simply waited. By noon, I knew she'd open the letter. My phone lit up with a string of furious texts, accusations, curses, demands. She called me a coward. She said I'd regret this. I let the words stack in silence, another digital record of her unraveling. Meanwhile, my attorney assured me the structure was solid. I had the law, the paperwork, and the history on my side. Amanda had nothing but a reckless text admitting she'd left and the trail of her late-night theft. In family court, that wasn't just weakness, it was self-destruction. News of her struggle filtered back to me in pieces. Friends told me she was stranded in Miami, her so-called better option already pulling away. Without easy money, the younger man had little interest in playing provider. Amanda, who once thought she had traded up, was left scrambling for hotel bills she couldn't cover. At home, I moved quietly through my days. I brewed my coffee, went to work, returned to the same quiet house. Neighbors asked how Amanda was enjoying her trip, and I only smiled. Let them imagine whatever they wanted. The truth was mine to keep, measured out in court filings and bank records. That evening, another letter went out, this time a formal petition for separation, citing abandonment and financial misconduct. My attorney worded it cleanly, without emotion, without drama, just facts. Amanda would receive it soon, and the silence surrounding her would grow heavier. I sat by the window, watching the Texas dusk settle over the street. In the quiet, I pictured her pacing a hotel room, phone in hand, realizing she had underestimated me. She had thought she could burn everything down with a single text. Instead, she had set fire to her own future. The silence wasn't just mine anymore. Now it belonged to her. The silence of empty accounts, the silence of friends withdrawing, the silence of a new lover slipping away. She had chosen this battlefield, and I had simply let her fight herself into a corner. And I hadn't even raised my voice. By the second week, Amanda's new life had begun to collapse in full view. Friends who once cheered her on grew quiet, uncomfortable with the scandals circling her name. Her younger companion, the one she called better, vanished the moment her cards stopped working. Without money to burn, she was no longer the adventure he signed up for. I didn't need to witness her fall directly. The silence told me everything. Fewer messages came through. The frantic texts turned into single lines, then into unanswered calls. Each one revealed the truth. She was losing ground fast. I let the phone buzz against the desk while I worked, unmoved, methodical. The court issued another order, this time freezing Amanda's remaining accounts and requiring her to appear for hearings in Dallas. Her attempt at escape had trapped her instead. She couldn't pay her way out, couldn't hide behind charm. Paperwork doesn't bend to words. It answers only to facts. When she finally sent a longer message, it was almost pleading. She said we could work something out, that things had gotten out of control. She wanted to talk, to negotiate. I read it twice, then archived it. My reply was the same as it had been since that first night. Silence. At the office, colleagues asked how I was holding up. I gave them the same calm smile, the same steady voice. They didn't need to know that while Amanda was unraveling, I was stronger than I had ever been. My systems were intact. My finances secure. My future already mapped out. Meanwhile, Amanda stumbled from one failed attempt to the next. She tried to borrow from friends, but they knew better. She tried to sell the story of betrayal, but her own messages betrayed her first. She had written her confession in real time, and now every word was being read by attorneys and judges. I poured myself a drink that Friday evening, sat in the quiet of my home, and looked over the case file one more time. It was airtight. Amanda's downfall wasn't about vengeance. It was about inevitability. She had chosen greed, arrogance, and betrayal. I had chosen silence, patience, and structure. And now, every piece was aligned against her. She wasn't fighting me anymore. She was fighting the weight of her own decisions. The silence had turned from a blade into a cage, and she was locked inside. The first court hearing was brief, clinical, and devastating for Amanda. She arrived alone, her confidence already cracked, her once perfect posture replaced by nervous shifting. I sat across the aisle, calm, collected, with my attorney beside me and a thick file of evidence ready to be opened. Amanda spoke first, claiming she had only taken her share, that she was entitled to half. But the judge didn't need my voice to see the truth. The messages spoke for themselves. Her late-night declaration, her reckless transfer, her accusations, all written in her own words. When the judge read aloud her text, "I'm not coming back. I've met someone much better and younger than you." The courtroom fell into silence. Amanda lowered her eyes. Her own confession had done what no speech of mine ever could. By the end of the session, the judge granted me temporary control of all marital finances, pending final division. Amanda was ordered to return the funds she had transferred. She protested, claiming they were gone. The judge's answer was sharp. "Then you will find a way to repay them." I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply nodded once, the same way I had on that first night when she believed she'd won. My silence in the courtroom carried more weight than any outburst could have. Outside, Amanda tried to catch my eye, but I walked past without a word. Her face showed a mix of anger and fear. She had stepped into this battle thinking charm and defiance would carry her through. But in front of the law, charm dissolves. Defiance crumbles. All that remained was her own trail of mistakes. Back at home, I poured myself a coffee and opened the blinds. The house was quiet, steady mine. Amanda's world, once loud and flashy, was shrinking by the day. Friends who once cheered her sudden freedom now distanced themselves, not wanting to be tied to scandal. Even her family grew cold, unwilling to cover her debts or defend her choices. Meanwhile, I kept moving silently, piece by piece. I restructured my investments, secured the house, and prepared the final filings that would make separation permanent. Amanda had thought money was power, but power, I knew, was control. Control of documents, of records, of silence. She had shouted her betrayal into the night, certain it would bury me. Instead, her own words buried her, and I hadn't raised my voice once. Weeks passed, and Amanda's life unraveled piece by piece. The accounts she once flaunted were frozen. The luxury she had chased slipped through her fingers. The younger man who promised her excitement was long gone, leaving her stranded in debt and disgrace. Every advantage she believed she had taken from me had dissolved into nothing. In court, my attorney presented the final evidence: bank records, transfers, and her stream of angry messages. The judge reviewed it all in silence, then ruled decisively. The house remained mine. The retirement accounts stayed intact. The vehicles, the investments, the credit lines, all under my control. Amanda was granted nothing beyond a modest allowance for basic needs, conditional upon her cooperation. She had walked out with arrogance. She left with scraps. She tried to protest, her voice rising, her words sharp. The judge raised a hand and told her bluntly that her actions had consequences, that betrayal carried weight. Amanda looked around the courtroom, searching for sympathy, but found none. Every eye saw her not as a victim, but as the architect of her own downfall. I said nothing. I didn't need to. My silence in those moments was more powerful than any speech could have been. It was the silence of a man who had prepared, who had waited, who had turned every detail into a weapon. Back home, I walked through the house slowly, taking in each room. The pictures on the wall, the furniture we had chosen together, the quiet hum of a life she had abandoned, all of it remained. Not because I had fought loudly, but because I had moved methodically, letting her mistakes carry her away. Amanda, once so sure she had escaped into something better, now lived in a small apartment funded by court-monitored stipends. Her friends had drifted. Her reputation was gone. And the silence that followed her was the same silence that had shielded me all along. On the night the final decree was signed, I sat alone at the dining table, the papers stacked neatly beside me. 21 years of marriage had ended, not with a scream, not with a fight, but with the quiet certainty of justice served cold. Amanda had taken her chance to destroy me. Instead, she had destroyed herself. And I had only whispered 2 words in the beginning: good luck. The day the divorce was finalized, I walked out of the courthouse into the bright Texas sun. The papers were signed, the accounts divided, the rulings clear. Amanda had nothing left to fight for. Her promises of a better life had dissolved into debts and silence. She glanced at me once across the parking lot, but I didn't meet her eyes. She was no longer part of my story. At home, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat in the quiet of my office. The house was still, steady, mine alone. For the first time in months, the weight had lifted. Not because I had shouted, not because I had demanded revenge, but because I had trusted silence to do what anger never could. Amanda had tried to burn everything in one night, but it was her own future that went up in flames. Friends asked me later how I managed it, how I stayed calm while she betrayed me, stole from me, humiliated me. I gave them the same answer every time. I didn't fight her battle. I let her fight herself. The systems I built, the discipline I lived by, the patience I carried, they were my weapons. She never saw them coming. Amanda now lives on the edge of town in a small apartment. She works part-time, scraping by on what the court allowed. The younger man she left for has long since disappeared. She spends her days in the shadow of the choices she made, haunted by the silence she once mistook for weakness. I rebuilt my life in the same methodical way I protected it. Quietly, steadily, piece by piece. I focused on my work, my health, my daughter, who told me she had never respected me more. Not for winning, but for never lowering myself to Amanda's level. For proving that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it waits. And that's the truth Amanda never understood. She believed betrayal was loud, that victory came in grand declarations. But in the end, it was silence that ended her. Silence that stripped away her illusions, one by one, until nothing remained. She sent her final message months ago, asking if we could meet, if there was still a chance. I read it once, archived it, and never replied. That was my last word to her. Nothing. Because silence, in the end, was the only answer she ever deserved. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.